Okay, we are live again on another edition of the Edlow Podcast. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. So, I haven't done a podcast in a few weeks, and I know that, and it's late at night, and I'm doing one now because I keep getting asked when I'm going to do another one, and I figured it was a good time. I got a bunch of questions pending from when I said I was going to do a Just Me podcast before I left on my trip to Europe. And I didn't get to it just because I was trying to get everything squared away for the trip. and and then coming back, trying to put out all the fires left by my absence. Also made it hard for me to get to this. So, but I am back and I'm doing this, and we've got a lot of great questions and a couple of messages, one of which I don't think I got. Well, I'm going to start, well, I don't think I'm going to start with it, but one of the messages I got, kind of a longer, not really a longer email, but kind of a longer email, I don't think was designed to be read on my podcast, but I'm going to do it anyway. So there you go. Because it was not, in my view, in good spirit or in good taste, and I want to address it. So here we are. But I got a bunch of questions from last time I wanted to address. Some of them I addressed on my social media while I was flying to and from to Europe, and it was a great trip. That was actually one of the questions I had. Well, for those of you who don't follow me on social media, my son and I started, now that my oldest has graduated high school, I kind of instituted a new kind of tradition with my kids, which was I told them all that when they graduated high school, they got a trip anywhere they wanted to go for at least 1 week with me. And so my son, who has been in choir for his entire high school career, was accepted to an international honor choir in London. And so he asked if we could do that as the trip. And so I said, sure. And it was about 4 days. And so I said, well, I said at least a week. So is there is there another country? Would you like to go to Scotland? Would you like to go to Paris? Would you like to go somewhere else? And he said, I don't know. And when we checked it out, we realized that the Olympics were in Paris, and that pretty much ended the discussion. And so we decided to plan that, and we extended it a little bit longer, a lot longer. It ended up being a total of 13 days with the flights. And so we had 11 days in Europe, and it was an absolute once in a lifetime trip, I think. We did a lot of different things. We started in London. We were there for about 4 or 5 days total. And that was kind of an interesting situation. That whole time was pretty much booked by the program. So I was hanging out, it was just me by myself and hanging out with a bunch of different people who were really nice to me and kind of let me tag along with them, which I really appreciated. And so, but I got to see the Tower of London. We got to see Buckingham Palace, and we got to see the V&A Museum. We got to see the Natural History Museum. We saw St. Paul's Cathedral and hiked all the way up to the top, over 1,000 steps to get there, which was pretty cool. So did that. Let's see what other things that there was a whole bunch of stuff. We ended up the last day. All of the students and all of the families ended up taking a trip to see Buckingham Palace, Parliament, Westminster Abbey, and for like a half a day. And then it culminated with Austin and the choir being able to sing at Royal Albert Hall. And so that was quite an interesting experience for me. I actually got pretty emotional watching it. It's right in the front row. And the choir was beautiful. They were amazing. I mean, obviously, right? They're some of the best singers in the world. But it was just kind of the moment was caught on, like, was not lost on me that this might be the last time that I get to see Austin, perform like that. And maybe not. He may continue on, and I hope he does, but it's not guaranteed. And it certainly was like we had been planning this trip pretty much for the whole school year. And so this was kind of like the culminating thing. And we had done other trips. We went to WrestleMania and we did a bunch of stuff, but this was like the trip. And it just struck me that this was it. Like, this was the last thing. I mean, he starts school on Tuesday, the day after this will come out, and starts college. And it was just kind of, I've said before, on this podcast and in other places, that when you're a parent, it's not like you're a parent of just one kid. Your kid has many kids over the course of its time. So it goes from being an infant to a toddler, and from a toddler to a baby boy, and then from a baby boy to a young boy, and then to a preteen, and then to a teen, and then to a young, into a young man, and then next thing you know, he's a man, and this, you're with them every day, so you don't know the transition. You don't see the transition happening. It's just one day that version of your child you knew is gone, and this new version standing in front of you, and you have to adjust. The problem with that is that you don't get the opportunity to necessarily say goodbye to that version of your child that you loved so much. And it was very nice to be able to take a trip like that and see my son up there with just doing something that he loves and doing something that is an incredible talent he has, as a way to kind of visually say goodbye to this version of Austin who I love so much. And I can't wait to see where he goes next. One of the questions that came through actually was, now that the trip is over, is there anything you wish you would have done differently? So for those of you who are thinking about going to Europe, particularly those who are either taller or heavier or a bigger person in general, like me, I'm 6'7", and so I'm a taller guy. There was a funny picture that I posted of myself. I got on a treadmill at the hotel gym, and clearly Europe was not built for tall people, because my head hit the ceiling while I was on the treadmill, so I couldn't do it. So I think that the one thing I would do differently. So we were in a really nice hotel that was booked by the program for London. But then in Paris, when I went through my travel agency, and I went through, her name is Felicia Camuso, and she's on my Facebook. If you want to use her, she's absolutely great. Shout out to Felicia for booking my trip and giving me some great ideas of what to do. But she booked me in all 4-star hotels, and then I looked at the cost, and I was like, ugh, I don't know if I want to spend that much money. I'm not going to be in the hotels that often, so how about we drop that down to a 3-star? And it saved me, a couple $1,000s, and I was like, okay, yeah, we'll do that. And boy, that was a mistake. If you want a human-sized bathroom and a human-sized bed, you do not want a 3-star accommodation. 4-star accommodations in Europe are like your mid-level Hiltons here in America. So I did have a mix of 3-star and 4-star reservation hotels. And by the way, all the people who were at the hotels were absolutely fantastic. Like, they really were. But yeah, I mean, just a completely different, the hotel we were at in Paris, we didn't use the Austin and I wouldn't use the elevator because it just felt like a death trap. I mean, it was that bad. Uh, so anyway, but so that's a long way of saying it. There are lots of ways where you can save money, but I would tell you that the one place to not try to save a buck is the hotel rooms because that it is quite it can be painful. I had a hard time sleeping in Paris at times. The other hotel we went to a little place called Lille, France. That's where all the basketball was going on for the Olympics, and uh, yeah, our air conditioning didn't work, and it was, I mean, the hottest part of the summer in France, so that was pretty rough. So yeah, I mean, I would definitely do that differently. I would also recommend um, that if you're going to go, I would tell people to plan it like you would a construction site or a remodel of your house. And what I mean by that is just take what you think it's going to cost and times it by 1.5 because you're going to go over budget and you just have to accept it. I had an idea of how much I was going to spend, and then I got there. And between the difference between dollars and euros, and then also just being excited about being there, I definitely spent way more than I ever expected. And looked at the credit card bill, and it was shocking. But you know what? It was worth every penny. I don't regret a single thing. And so, if you're trying to budget and you're trying to put it together, just understand like these you never know when you're going to be back. So it'd be best to save enough to where you're not stressing about whether you're going to get that gift or you're going to buy you know, that specific thing to remind you of Paris or whatever. Um, some of the things that we did that I would recommend people try to do. We did a lot. Like looking at the list, we did a lot of stuff. We took a Beatles tour. There's a great place called Viator, Viator. There's an app, and I think they're all over the world, but they were really great for London and Paris, where you could get private tours. And one tour we did was a private Beatles tour. So we had a taxi pick us up and take us to all the different sites in London that had Beatles history to it. So they took us to the rooftop where the last rooftop concert was. They took us to different pubs where they were known to hang out. They took us to an apartment that was owned by Paul McCartney that was then used by John Lennon, which was then used by Jimi Hendrix, which was then used by David Bowie. They, took us over to Abbey Road and Abbey Road Studios. We visited like 20 different sites over the course of 4 hours. And also, our taxi was super cool because my son was the Beatles fan. I'm not a huge Beatles fan. So he asked me who I liked, and I was like, well, I like The Who, and I like Rolling Stones, I like David Bowie, I like Oasis, and he took us to a bunch of places like the street where the What's the Story Morning Glory was, the album cover was, the picture was taken, took us to a place where David Bowie lived, took us to the Rolling Stones official store that was there in London. So it was pretty cool. That was a fun one. And then Piccadilly Square is pretty cool. The Hard Rock Cafe on Piccadilly Square has some really cool rock memorabilia. So the food is typical for London, but the memorabilia was really cool. And then I would definitely catch a show on the West End, which is London's version of Broadway. We saw two different shows. We saw Back to the Future, the musical, which actually was in my view, the perfect blend between 80s fun and cheese, 80s music. It stuck to the story. And the guy who played Doc Brown was phenomenal. He made the whole show. And the effects were really cool too. So if you get a chance to see that, it was a lot of fun. But I think the coolest thing we did, and this is the last thing we did in London. Well, let me back up before I share. We spent I think we spent 5 days in London, and then we shot over to Paris, and we spent a few days in Paris, and then we spent 2 days in Lille, France, where because we're obviously we're basketball people, and all the basketball qualifiers were being done in Lille. So we traveled up there, stayed in a hotel there, and watched 4 different basketball games, which were each really cool for different reasons. And then we came back to Paris for a night, and then and watched the gymnastics finals there. And then we traveled back to London to fly out, and we spent about a half a day in London. And so did a lot in Paris, but on our last day in London, I asked Austin, so what do you want to do? I don't have anything planned, anything scheduled. What would you like to do? And he said, I want to see Phantom of the Opera. And I was like, you know what? I've seen Phantom of the Opera. I'm not a big fan. Are you sure that's what you want to see? And he goes, yeah. And so I looked it up, and I realized that it was going to be done in the oldest theater in London, the original theater where it debuted. It was His Majesty's Theater. And so I said, okay, that might be cool. And I went online, and the website wasn't working, and there was only like 6 tickets left. So I was like, I don't know if we're going to be able to make that work. So I said, well, I'll tell you what, why don't we go down there, and we'll just go to the box office, and we'll see if they got tickets. And if they don't, there's a bunch of, the West End has a bunch of things going on, a bunch of different shows. So I'm like, we'll just go walk to another show and do that. And he's like, okay, that's fine. And we walked in, and we got the last 2 tickets, which were 7th row center. And that was one of the coolest theater experiences I've ever had. So if you ever get a chance, if you're in London, getting a chance to see specifically Phantom of the Opera on the West End is an experience that you should definitely try to have. The other thing I would recommend you do is there is a dinner cruise that you can do. We had it organized through the performance series that Austin, got into. But seeing London at night, all lit up, was really, really pretty. So that was another thing that was fun. There's the other thing that's cool is all the museums, at least all the ones I went to, were free. And so you can go check those out. Natural History Museum, the Museum of Science, the V&A, they're all right there on the same block. I wish I could have gone to the Museum of War and seen Winston Churchill's War Room. That was something I kind of would have liked to have done. I would have liked to have seen Stonehenge. We just didn't have time to see it all. In Paris, we did a lot. We saw the Eiffel Tower, we saw the catacombs, the Palace of Versailles. We went to the Paris Temple. We went to Lille. We went to Dunkirk, which was really pretty cool as well. Let's see, what else did we see? I mean, we ate our weight in crepes. All the food everywhere is amazing in Paris. I mean, you can just walk into any open air cafe and have the best meal of your life. I found the best way to eat, and I'm going to incorporate this more when I travel, was the server would come up, and I would say, okay, so I don't think I'm going to be coming back here ever again. So if I'm not coming back, what is the one thing that you think I need to try here? And they'll bring you like 4 things you need to try. And all of it is amazing. At least in Paris, all of it was amazing. And so, yeah, that was great. I told the story on my social media. I'll share it here. So the last night we were in Paris, we had been walking. I mean, literally, my feet are still recovering from the trip. I had my whole foot my whole feet were they were completely blistered up and calloused over now because of all of the walking we did. And So the last night in Paris around 9 o'clock, Austin he is pretty spent. He didn't want to go back out. And I was like, well, I'm not going out like that. I want to go get something sweet. And so I took a walk and I walked to this place about a mile away, a little over a mile away. There's this gelato place I come upon. And in this gelato place, I see this Dutch couple and they're eating, ice cream cones with gelato. So I walk up to him and I go, hey, listen, where'd you get that? And he points to it and I go, so what should I order? And he goes, honestly, this is like the fourth time I've been here tonight. I don't think you're going to have a problem. So I walk up there and I go, okay, so it's gelato. I'm like a 20-minute walk from my hotel. And so I asked the guy, I said, hey, listen, so I need to get some gelato, but I need it to last long enough to get back to my hotel. Do you have something that you can fit it in? And he pulls this big styrofoam carton out. And I go, okay, that'll work. And then he goes, well, what do you want? And I go, well, listen, same thing. I said, this is my last night in Paris. If this is the only time I'm ever going to be here, what do you think I need to try? And he just looked at me and he says, let me do this for you. And I said, fair enough. And he just started putting all that gelato on there. And I was like, okay. And so I hoofed it back to the hotel. And I sit down with Austin and I'm like, let's give this a try. It was the best gelato either one of us has ever tried. And I don't say that lightly, because the next day when we were in London, we had gelato at another place and it didn't even compare. I mean, we had 5 different flavors. We had strawberry, pistachio, peanut butter, chocolate, and cookies and cream. And it was so good that Austin looked at me and he said, if we get up early tomorrow, can we go back? I'm like, I don't think they're going to be open tomorrow morning. And then he's like, this is so good, it deserves music. And he put on Ice Cube's Today Was a Good Day while we ate the whole thing. We ate the whole carton. So just another fun experience to remember. The catacombs were really interesting. It was really interesting to watch, Austin have these experiences that I never had when I was a kid. But the catacombs, I think, hit him pretty hard, just seeing millions of skulls and bones that represented people, humans, was pretty interesting. But anyhow, if you ever get a chance to go to the Olympics, go. I mean, we got to see beach volleyball, boxing. I did not see the controversial boxer, the women's boxer who won the gold. That was a different night, but they were all talking about it at boxing when we were there. And then we saw 4 basketball games, and I'll tell you what, there was nothing more exciting. The energy was so exciting when we saw Team France play Team Germany, and seeing the French get so excited about Team France was something that was really cool to watch. I bet going to a soccer game in France or in England would be pretty cool. But yeah, and then we went and saw Team USA play Puerto Rico, and seeing everybody just be in awe of the NBA players was really something interesting, because we get to see it. I mean, it's on our TVs every day, and you can go to the Golden One and see these guys play anytime. So it was pretty interesting to see these guys that was their first time ever seeing those basketball players playing. And it's a pretty cool experience. So anyway, another tip, some tips for travelers, bring lots of cash. They prefer it. Um, you know, interesting when you're in restaurants. So in England, tipping is put on the bill automatically, so you don't have to tip on top of that. And then in France, they don't expect tips. So, you don't necessarily have to give 20%. If you gave a couple euros, they'd be your best friend. They like the Americans because of that. So, um, anyhow, overall, it was just an amazing trip. I had a great time. So, there's that. Now that gets me to this email I got. So what I did, and I do this, look, I use my social media as basically kind of my personal journal, for certain things, not for everything, but for, a lot of things, particularly when it comes to my kids. So every single day I posted what we had done that day, and people seem to enjoy it. Some people seem to really enjoy watching what we were doing every single day. Had a couple people send me messages saying that they were going to use some of those ideas when I got, when they go to wherever. Some of my friends were actually on their way to, London or Paris or wherever, kind of in that same time frame. So that's kind of worked out. But yeah, I got this message and I just wanted to read it and kind of address it. Anonymously, of course. I don't want to call the person out specifically, but it says, Dear Josh, I have to tell you, I think it is incredibly rude and tone deaf of you to be flaunting your European trip in front of everyone. I know that you have lots of money and you're able to spoil your kids with all sorts of things like this, but not all of us have those type of funds. I know you think that anyone can make it and anyone can be like you, but the fact is most people can't afford anything these days. It's no longer the 50s where a guy can support a family of 4 working a standard job on a high school education. It is much harder, especially for people from lower income families. I'm glad you had a great time, but perhaps you could be a little more empathetic to those who are the have-nots. Okay, so I got a few bones to pick with this. So first off, I'm not flaunting my European trip in front of anybody. If you know me, you know that that trip was one that I had been planning for a very, very long time. And that was the first ever 2-week vacation I have taken since becoming an attorney 12 years ago. That was the longest vacation I've ever taken. So, yeah, for you to suggest that somehow this was like, some sort of, I get the impression that you are saying something along the lines of, well, I'm a rich guy and I'm flaunting all these fancy trips I'm doing. That only started this last year or two. I worked, it took me 9 years to get through law school from college on. It took me 5 years to get through college, and it took me 4 years to do the evening division to get through law school. And then 12 years later, I took this trip. So yeah, I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm going to post about it because it was a really great memory. Now, this thing about it's no longer the 50s where a guy can support a family of 4 working a standard job on a high school education. Now, what I'm about to say is not to say that it is not hard to make ends meet. I know I did it for a long time. There was a long, long period of time. That's another thing before I go into this. What you are seeing now, as far as me being able to take these trips and me being able to do these things that I do, they're the end result of a lot of financial discipline over the years. Not perfect, but financial discipline. Putting money away, paying off debt, not getting in over your head. I often tell people when they see my my 2019 Ford Raptor, that up until 2019, I was driving a 2012 Camry. The same Camry I had in law school, I drove for the first 7 years of my law practice. So, and before I moved into the house that I live in now, I lived in a standard 3-bed, 2-bath house with a granny flat outside. Before that, I was in a 2-bedroom duplex with 4 kids. So it's not like I just became an attorney and the next thing you know, I get to have big fancy trips to Europe. That is not how it went. I was able to do this because of a lot of decisions I made financially, not getting over my head and living within my means, which grew over time. Now, as far as this idea, it's no longer the 50s, you're right. It's no longer the 50s where a guy can support a family of 4 working a standard job. Now, here's the thing, though. Do you really want that life? Because you can have it. Because that father who was supporting his family of 4 on one income also only had 1 car, 1 TV, no cable, no Wi-Fi, no cell phone, took 1 vacation a year for 2 weeks, did all his own auto maintenance, did all his own law maintenance, fixed up his own house, did all of those things, didn't have 10 streaming services, didn't go to Starbucks, didn't go to fast food, didn't do any of those things. You can have that life. You can, if you want it. But I'm guessing, and I know who you are, okay? So I'm going to make some assumptions, but I see your social media too. And so when I see you going to Starbucks every day, going to Taco Bell every day, going to wrestling shows all the time, traveling all up and down the state, talking about what you're watching on Netflix and all those things, I'm willing to bet that your lifestyle is much different than that father of a family of 4 who bought their house. Now, that doesn't mean, I'm not trying to say that you don't deserve those things or you shouldn't enjoy those things, but please don't suggest that somehow there's an apples to apples comparison to the people of the 50s who are living a much different life than you are living. We are now in a much more consumer age where we are spending money on so many more things that we don't need that it's ridiculous. I mean, and I'm one of them. Look, I have a Paramount Plus subscription. I don't watch Paramount Plus ever, and neither do any of my kids. I should probably cancel it, but I don't. I'm sure if I looked at all the things that I am paying for streaming, I would be sick to my stomach. But the point is that, there's no correlation between what I am doing and what you are doing. There is no correlation between my empathy and my enjoying my life. I don't understand it. Just because I've had a good life because I have done certain things that have made me successful does not mean that I am somehow exploiting you or somebody else for that success. There is no link between us. So I'm sorry. Well, I'm not sorry if my life is somehow hurting you, making you feel bad about yours, but they're not the same. And you can have, I do believe you can have the life that I have if you're willing to put in the work and the sacrifices you did. I sacrificed a lot of things. Some of the things I kind of regret. I didn't see my kids a lot for a lot of those years. In law school, there were weeks where I was leaving home before they were awake and coming home while they were asleep. So, and that did not end as soon as I passed the bar. In fact, it continued. So I put in a lot of time and a lot of effort to be able to do these things and catch up on some of those things I missed when they were younger. So please, I don't do what I do to try to make you feel bad, and I am not going to let you make me feel bad just because my my life is in a place where it is. So no disrespect, still care about you. If I see you in the street, I'll shake your hand and treat you just as good as I do anybody else. But that's how I feel about it. And if you don't like it, you can always not look or unfriend me. You're not going to offend me by doing that. So anyhow, okay. Whew. Had to get that off my chest. So, all right. So there were some random questions that people asked me that I wanted to address. I just like doing this. It's kind of fun. What is the last TV show you binged? It's interesting. It's changed. I actually just binged the whole Lacey Peterson documentary on suggestion, and it was very interesting. I don't know. There's another one coming out on Peacock on Tuesday where Scott Peterson actually shares his version of the story, and I'm very interested in hearing that because I think he did it. And the lawyer in me wonders if there truly was enough evidence for that beyond a reasonable doubt, but I think he did it. So I'm not thinking about it too much. Other than that, Married at First Sight is a binge show that I love watching. I love watching trash TV. It is my thing. And so, yeah, there you go. Okay. What time period would you like to live in? And it must be one you haven't experienced. So I think I would really enjoy living in the 1960s. I really like the music. There's a lot of cool historical stuff from landing on the moon, allegedly, and like the Manson family murders, Woodstock, like the Vietnam War and all the protests, the hippie movement. I think it would have been really interesting to live back then and to just kind of live that time and see what it was like. Just super interesting. What is a conspiracy theory you believe in or want to believe in? Okay, so I believe in UFOs. I do believe in aliens, and I think the government knows so much more about this than they're letting on. So that is my my conspiracy theory situation. So there we go. Okay. Let's see. What do future lawyers need to think about that they don't think about enough? I actually answered this on social media, but I want to answer it again. And I think that this is something I actually advise some potential law students about this stuff. And I think that this is something that's important. I don't know if it's directly on point, but I think it's something that law students and probably even college students need to kind of understand. So it is always important for you to do your best and to work as hard as you can. But I think that law students spend way too much time worrying about their grades. And what do I mean by that? I mean, I've been an attorney for 12 years. I've gotten a lot of awards. I'm a partner at a prestigious law firm. I've tried cases to 7-figure verdicts. Do you know how many people have asked me what my GPA was in law school? 0. Not one. Not one. Do you know how many people have asked me what my class rank was? 0. Not one. I ended up getting a trial advocacy certificate. Do you know how many people care about that? Nobody. Sure, your grades might help you get the prestigious first job if you want that. But really, after that, the only thing that matters is, are you or are you not a good attorney? Your reputation in the community. And so, nobody's ever asked me about the fact that I was on the honors trial team, or whether there was moot court in my background, or if I wrote a law review article. Nobody cares about any of that. They care about how you do lawyering. So if I were a law student, I would stop focusing on my grades. Well, I wouldn't say that. You want to pass the tests, you want to pass the bar, but I would start trying to take as many practical application classes and doing as much actual lawyering if possible, like working with lawyers, so that you're light years ahead of everybody else. I learned more clerking from my boss, my mentor, in probably a month than I did in 4 years of evening division law school. They don't teach you how to be a lawyer. They teach you how to think, and that's about it. So there's some advice for you. Anyone who's listening to this who's thinking about law school, you can always reach out to me. I'm always willing to talk about the experience. So, what's a hidden talent you have that you don't tell people about? I played the trombone in the band. I don't know if I still have this talent or not. I haven't picked one up in however long it's been since I've been out of high school. But I did play the trombone fairly well. And so that is my hidden talent. Would you ever own a Cybertruck? I don't think so. I think they look weird, and I don't like electric cars. I just like the sound of gas-powered engines. I'm sure eventually I'll have to get an electric car, but as of right now, I enjoy my Raptor. I feel it fits me very well, so I'm going to stick with that. Okay. So there's another email I got here that I think was more important and was kind of the bulk of what I wanted to address today and why I wanted to get this out, because this came just recently and I wanted to address it. Dear Josh, I have been struggling for a while with my testimony of Jesus and the church. I have had a lot of stuff going on in my life recently that makes me question whether any of this is real. Now, the reader goes into some specifics of what's going on in their lives, and I have taken they're pretty specific, so I'm going to withhold those details just for the sake of anonymity for the writer and the writer's family. I hope that doesn't offend the person who wrote the message. I just thought that might be better, and I don't think it's as pertinent. So it says, I guess I just always thought that there was supposed to be some blessing at the end of all of this. So far, it doesn't seem to correlate. Like, it doesn't matter how good I do or how closely I follow. I don't really get blessed. I just keep getting hurt and keep being in pain. Anyway, I don't know if any of this makes sense. I appreciate you reading and sharing. So I feel you. I feel you a lot, more than a lot of people know. I've had this similar struggle. There isn't always a correlation. I think that we, as members of the church and Christians in general, we think that somehow if we always do the right thing, we will always be blessed. That is not always the case. You could read the story of Job in the Old Testament, and that would tell you that. And sometimes, look, you could be doing all the right things, and someone has free agency to do things that hurt you. And God, unfortunately, isn't going to stop that from happening. And, I have learned through sad experience that you can put your whole heart into something or someone, and then they're just going to do whatever they're going to do. And you can't control it all the time. And it sucks. It's one of the most painful parts of existence that the people who have the biggest capacity to hurt you tend to be the people closest to you. So I understand where you're coming from, but I think there is a bit of a misunderstanding when we think that somehow if you were just a little more righteous, you would be more blessed. I don't think that's always the case. And it leads to a lot of self-loathing and struggling, such as this, because you believe that. You believe that somehow there is just, well, I did all the right things, so everything's supposed to go right? And that's just not the way it goes. And so, I can share a story that I was thinking about for my own life. And I don't know if this will help you or not. But I thought I would share maybe a testimony building experience that I had. One particular day I can remember a couple of years back, I was really struggling. In the midst of a really, really tough time, it felt like my life was being flipped upside down. Everything was changing. This was a few years back. And, I had gotten some information that made me question my own judgment. Like, maybe, got some information on some things that were going on that made me question if I even recognized my life. And it even made me question whether the Spirit or God, whatever you want to call it, was even guiding my life at all. And so this particular day turned to night, and I was cooking dinner for my kids, and they were not helping the situation. Not only were they not helping, they were hindering the process. And not anything particularly egregious or anything that I can remember specifically, just kids acting as kids sometimes do. And as I ran around the kitchen, I remember it was taking all I had to stop myself from just bursting into tears. I was just full of anxiety. Things were changing all around me. I was kind of new world I was entering. And I just remember turning my head away, and as I took deep breaths, trying to stop myself from kind of just panicking. And just the room felt like it was spinning. As I looked around, the house was a mess. I thought my life was a mess. And there just seemed to be no hope. And so as I stood at the stove, I started to offer a silent prayer. And I don't even know if the prayer is the way to describe it, because it wasn't in the traditional sense. It wasn't like I was kneeling down, or I was like had my eyes closed, or I was even talking. It was almost like you hear in the scriptures talking about having a wrestle with God. Because I was softly talking to him like I was just talking to some person who was standing there. And the question, what I was saying was, where are you? What is happening right now? Is this the plan? Was this the plan? Is this what I signed up for? Is this what my inheritance is? Because this isn't what I wanted. And my sadness almost turned to anger as I was questioning God. It was like, and I was saying all the things that I would say that anybody who's gone through something difficult would have asked. Why is this happening? I have remained faithful. I gave my life to you all those years ago. I served a mission. I went to church. I can't think of 3 weeks in a row that I've missed church in my entire adult life. I pay my tithing. I magnify my callings. I do my ministering. I have not that I've been perfect, but I have done what you have asked me to do. And I have used your atonement in those times when I was not doing everything I can. And is this the repayment? Is this the blessing that I was promised? Is this what it was? You know, like, was I wrong when I felt the Spirit in these things? Maybe this is all wrong because I did everything I was supposed to do almost to the T, and I still came up short. I still got gypped. All those things. We've all felt that way, right? And I remember at the very end, I go, look, I don't know if you're there or not right now. But if you are, I could really use a break. I could really use some reassurance right now. Because if this is true, if this is right, if you are there and you are truly guiding my life, I'm going to need something more. Because this is not seeming like something I can really bear. And as I got dinner ready, I put it on the table. Me and the kids were there. We're just the 5 of us. And we sat down together. In the midst of the dinner, my youngest daughter, Lexi, said, let's go around the table and let's each say one nice thing about each other. And this was a practice that we had developed over the years, something we enjoyed doing together from time to time. We would all go around the room and each person would have to say something different, nice about everyone else at the table. And so I'll admit I was begrudging when I agreed, because what was I supposed to say? No, right? And when we'd done this practice in the past, the kids would always just say something that was simple, like, Piper, you're really good at soccer. Lincoln, you're really good. You're getting really good at that video game you like. Austin, you're really good at basketball or singing or whatever. But this night, it seemed different. They were saying things that were more meaningful. Lincoln, I love the way you always make me laugh. Austin, I really enjoyed that you took some time out of your day to play basketball with me. Things like that. And then we got to my oldest son, and I think he was probably 14 at the time, maybe 15. It's probably 14. And then he went around the room, and then he got to me, and he looked at me. And he said, Dad, I'm grateful that throughout your life, when things have been tough, that you've always remained faithful in the church. Because if you hadn't, I don't know if I would have the strength to do it myself. And in that moment, I felt an overwhelming peace. I felt an impression, almost like a voice saying, it's going to be okay. I am with you, and the atonement is big enough to fix this too. Now, some might think that's a coincidence. Some might think that was just, luck of the draw, or maybe I'm reading too much into it. But I would like to think that little moment there was an answer to prayer, a small miracle to tell me that I need to keep going. And so my message to you is that things don't always make sense. I can tell you that my life looks a lot better and more hopeful now than it did those years before. And it's not like I'm not going to feel those feelings again. But I can't promise you that things are going to get better tomorrow. But I can tell you that every single time I've gone through anything traumatic or difficult, I've looked back and said, I'm so grateful that happened because my life is so much better now. And I am seeing that every single day through so many relationships that I have, through the love that I feel from those around me, the most important people in my life. Seeing Austin become just this absolute monster that's going to take on the whole world. Watching my other kids grow up and despite all the stuff going on around them, still being faithful and strong and knowing what they're going to do. That's possible. There's always something good to look at. And so I don't know if that helps. I hope it does. I know that it's hard sometimes to believe it, but it is true. God's with you, and I believe that. So hopefully that helps. If not, reach out again. I don't pretend to know everything. I don't pretend to know the world. I certainly don't pretend to be perfect. I am not. I have a lot of blind spots. And so, but I do know that there's always something to be grateful for and hopeful for. So there was one last little question that someone asked me, and that was, what do you tell your kids about your parenting style? I don't know what that means, but I can tell you this, Austin and I had an opportunity to have some pretty good conversations while we were in Europe. And we talked about, my parenting style and the things that I'm doing and the things that, he liked that I did to push him to be his best and all these different things. And I told him the same thing I'm going to tell you, and that is that I am not a perfect parent by any means. Far, far from it. I've got a lot of, sometimes I feel like when I'm doing this stuff and I'm on, I'm on the, in the moment, I feel like sometimes I'm making 100 life-altering decisions every single day. And I'm making those decisions in the moment, like within a heartbeat. And they all could just change everything for the people around me. And I'm constantly trying to make those decisions. And I'm going to get some of them wrong. And so I told Austin, I said, the best I can do is just tell you, if there's things that you see that you like that I do, when you become a parent, try to emulate those things. And if there's things that you see that I do that didn't go well for you and you didn't like, do something different. Because I don't have all the answers. There's no rule book to this. And I can't even parent my 4 kids the same way. They all are different. So, that's the advice. So if you're asking me what parenting advice I have, is just that just always have the best intentions and always try your best with what you've been given. I can say that even though I make a ton of mistakes all the time, that I am doing the best I can with the tools I have. And that is not going to go 100% right. So I just hope I hope I get it right enough. And I think I'm doing a pretty good job. Seeing Austin up there singing and doing those things, I know that even though I've probably done a million things wrong, I know I did at least 4 things right. And that was raising these awesome kids of mine. So anyhow, that's it. Trying to be consistent. I'm back. Once I get some things under control at work, I'll try to pump more of these out there, because I know some people have been asking me when they're going to come out. So subscribe, keep subscribing. If you want to be a guest, you can always ask me. I'm happy to interview almost anybody if you think you've got an interesting story. And we'll talk again soon, guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks.